Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we kick off our second day of the Squash Summit. This Squash Summit is obviously organized by Sportageous. It is also powered by Ranked In and SportCam. The Squash Summit aims to bring together the best minds in squash with a mission to grow the sport and find a common path for everyone involved towards its future. We had an extremely successful first day yesterday, and we look forward to our second day today with some of our most successful and amazing speakers. You can enjoy the conference on your mobile devices, but we highly recommend that you use your desktops to enjoy the full experience. At the end of each session, we will have a Q&A for about 10 to 15 minutes. So if you go on the right section of your desktop, you will see that there's a Q&A section. Feel free to put your questions on there as the session is going, and then I will make sure to read some of your questions to the speakers. Unfortunately, we won't have time to read all the questions, but luckily, Sportageous has managed to create a very smooth system where at the end of the sessions, you will be allowed to go into the break rooms where you can ask the speakers whatever questions you want at the end. Before we begin, I'd like to make some exciting announcements. So one of our gold sponsors is called Coop. They're giving away three t-shirts. So the first one was announced yesterday. I actually announced the winner during the conference. The second winner will be announced by Brian, who is the co-founder of Coop, and this will be announced in his session. And it can actually be any of you because it's a random pick from the list of attendees. So good luck. And in the Coop session, Brian will also explain how it's going to work for the third winner. Now, I know some of you think I'm not going to go the extra mile for a t-shirt, but this is not actually just a t-shirt. It's the world's first cinnamon t-shirt using recycled plastic bottles and cinnamon extract. So it's, one of a kind, it's recyclable, it's sustainable, and it can actually fit in your fist. I'm so sorry, my dog is making a noise. 1 second. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so back to what I was saying about Coop. So basically, it is the world's first cinnamon t-shirt, and it can fit in your fist. And the fun fact about it is that you can actually wear it 6 to 7 times without it smelling bad. I haven't tried it myself, but the co-founders of Sportageous, Zushan and Furkan, claim it works. So you can ask them. Okay, so I just want to explain to you guys how it works in the reception. So basically, there are 3 things. So there's the lounge, there's the sessions, and there's the arena. In the lounge, you have 2 different types of tables, the social tables and the fixed tables. The social tables are basically unlabeled tables, which they can expand. So if you go into the social tables and you only see 2 seats, you can actually go and take a seat, and it expands up to 8 seats. And the fixed tables, these are labeled tables, so it's private, either one-on-one, 3-way conversations, or larger groups. There's also something really exciting called the speed networking, where basically you will be matched up with any random person, and you can call them for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the call will be disconnected automatically, and then you will be redirected and connected with another speaker. The session basically are the page what we're on right now, which you can attend. And then the arena is where all the exhibitors are. So there are 2 different types of tables in the arena. The first one is where you go and speak to an exhibitor. And the second one is basically when you don't find an exhibitor there, then what you can do is you can just press the I'm interested button, and that will redirect you to a page where you can put your email, and then the exhibitor will get in touch with you later on. I will also explain this again throughout the conference because I know it's a lot of information. But the most important thing is that you just need to know that after every session, you can go into the break rooms and have your one-on-one conversations, or you can go ask the speakers whatever questions you want to ask them. Just a reminder, if you post anything on social media, please make sure you tag Sportages. Please make sure you follow them. And also make sure you use the hashtag of the Squash Summit, which is hashtag the Squash Summit. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. So we have our diamond sponsors, Ranked-In and SportCam. Our platinum sponsors, Melior Sports, Magno Sports, Racket Pros, and Reacher. And lastly, but honestly, this is for me one of the most important topics, and I think it's amazing that Sportages were able to create this summit for things like that, for messages like that to get across. So if you didn't attend yesterday's session, I spoke about this yesterday as well. So we, Sportages have chosen the PSA Foundation's We Are One Fund as this year's fundraiser. And if you haven't heard of We Are One Fund, it's basically a fund created by the PSA Tour, where they are supporting all the PSA players to basically stay on tour. So of course, after the COVID-19 happened, a lot of players couldn't finance themselves. And I'm not talking about financing themselves to do luxurious things. We're really talking about medical bills, rent, even things such as food. Because PSA players really rely on squash being their main source of income. So when the PSA was suspended, they couldn't play, they couldn't go train, they couldn't play tournaments, so they didn't have a source of income. So a lot of the players were really, really, really terribly affected by the COVID-19. Fortunately, the PSA was able to raise over $100,000 of funds. And I just want to say that these are not divided. The 100% of these funds go to PSA players. And these funds have already been distributed globally across all rankings, which is amazing. And so many players would have given up on their careers if it wasn't for this fundraising, which is, again, amazing. So thank you so much for the squash community. Thank you for everyone who has donated. But to move forward, for us to still be able to help those players to stay on tour and to really, be able to survive, we really need to keep the donations going. Yes, 100,000 is amazing, but we really, really, really want to keep supporting and making sure our players are safe and healthy. So if you guys, I'm going to put the link. Actually, I'm going to ask Zushan to put the link in the comment section, but I'm just going to say it to you guys. So you can basically donate by going to donate.thesquashsummit.com. Zushan will put the link directly in the comment section. And again, this is, I think people, when they see donations and people get a bit skeptical, but again, 100% of those funds are going to players. And even if each person donates a small amount, such as $10 or $20, it will make a big difference. So please make sure you donate, try to donate, and anyone who helps will be helping directly our players. So thank you so much. Last note, once speakers are on, please, for the other speakers, make sure to have your videos shut down and to be on mute so that we can increase the speed and make sure that there are no lag issues. Now, before I introduce you to our first speaker of the day, we have a short video by Peter Murphy. Peter is a federal member of the parliament in the Australian government and a huge fan and advocate of squash. So let's watch her video and then I will go on and introduce you to our first speaker.
Hi, my name is Peter Murphy. I'm the federal member for the electorate of Dunkley, which for those of you who don't know is in southeast Melbourne, mainly the area of Frankston. Why am I talking to you about a virtual squash summit hosted by Sportages, which is a new startup organisation out of Canberra? Because, as you can see, I am what is commonly known as a squash tragic. I've played squash since I was 12 years old, and for me it has been the thing I've done with my dad. That meant that we had a really special connection. It's been a sport where I had some success and it gave me confidence. It's been a sport that has given me lifelong friends, health, and just, it's a great game. And one of the things that I am very sad about is that it has declined in Australia in particular from what was an amazing peak in the 70s and 80s. I've tried over the years to play my part in getting more people to play our amazing game as the president of Squash Victoria and the vice president of Squash Australia. And since I've been elected to the federal parliament, I have, sometimes to the amusement of some of my colleagues, done all that I can to promote the game that we all love. It's really a terrific game that women and men can play together, girls and boys can play together, and we know how important that is. And we've seen the efforts of many people around the world in the last decade or so also try to bring sport to the masses and bring squash to the masses through innovations with technology. So I am a firm believer that as with baseball, build it and they will come. The more squash courts, the more opportunities we can get for people to be exposed to the game that we love, the more people who will not only love it but play it. So I want to commend this virtual squash summit and Squash Ages for hosting it, and thank you for reaching out to me on social media. And I can promise to continue to be part of the campaign for squash to get into the Olympics, more people to play squash, and I won't be deterred by my colleagues laughing at me in Parliament because I talk about it.
Thank you so much, Pira, for this video. So Pira couldn't be here with us today, but this is her video. So just before we start, I just wanted to say that Game Day is offering a discount to all Squash Summit attendees. Please head over to their booth to access your discount in the arena. And you can talk to them more about what kind of discounts they have. Now, without further ado, let's get this conference started. Our first keynote speaker of the day is Zena Wooldridge. She is the president of the World Squash Federation. Zena was elected as the 10th WSF president in December 2020 and became only the second female to hold the position. Zena also served as the European Squash Federation's president between 2013 and 2019. Zena will discuss how the governing body has dealt with the pandemic, her role as a president, and the challenges facing the federation and future plans to grow the sport. Zena, are you ready?
Indeed. Yeah.
Amazing. The stage is yours.
Thank you. So am I able to show my slides, Zushan, please? Yep. Will my slides show? Excellent. So I'm able to control those, Zushan? Okay.
Sorry, Zena, we'll have to control them for you. So just let us know when you want to move on to the next slide.
Okay,
and
good.
We'll just all right.
Okay, thank you. Ready to go? Well, good morning, everyone, and good evening to those in Australia. It's great to see so many squash friends around the world who have been attending these last 2 days. And I think the squash world probably needs more Peter Murphys. So thanks very much, Peter, for that enthusiasm. Can I thank Zushan, Kanzi and the team for putting on this squash summit? It's an excellent initiative. So hopefully it'll be one of more to come. So just a very quick bio. Kanzi did mention I've had a dual career, one in the sports industry for most of my paid career. And I've always had a parallel track in squash, having chaired England squash for 6 years, and then gone on to European squash. So yeah, I have very much my roots in squash. So just to give you a little bit of background about World Squash. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So the WSF is the recognised international federation for squash, recognised by the International Olympic Committee, and it is a member federation. It has 123 members in membership, and they are divided across the 5 regions, as you can see on that map. The largest being Europe, but Asia growing very fast. So yes, very much a member federation. It has only 2 full-time staff, and a number of very part-time staff. Next slide, please. And is driven by its commissions. Now, its commissions are chaired and populated by a very extensive and a really invaluable network of expert volunteers who are very committed to our sport, and we couldn't manage the sport without them. And I do think that even with additional resources, the structure for WSF would remain very much rooted in our expert volunteers. You can see the range of commissions that we have. Some of them are very mandatory, such as rules and anti-doping and ethics. But there are very many others of variety of, you can see the variety of breadth of remit that World Squash has. Next slide, please. So one might say that our main assets are our people and our expert volunteers and our small staff. But actually, the range of other assets and properties we have are listed here in terms of our championships, which are listed in terms of men's and women's teams, World Juniors, doubles, masters, and hopefully the World Cup will come back fairly soon. We also provide a world coaching infrastructure in terms of coach education and development for those nations that don't have their own coach education infrastructure. And similarly with World Squash officiating, and that is actually in partnership with PSA, a very important partnership there in terms of developing future squash officials, and about to go live. We have Spin, that many of you will be aware of, and also a large group of accredited and certified companies, and I think that's dropped off the bottom of the slide, probably lost something in transition, but we have a large group of accredited and certified companies for courts, equipment and the like. But I think we've got to the stage now where now is the right time for a new strategy for WSF for all kinds of reasons, and probably nicely timed in terms of PSA also developing its strategy. So the next slide, please, Tishan. Thank you. Yeah, great, thanks. You know, the world, the international sporting landscape is becoming ever more crowded and competitive, and we've seen the entry of new sports, and we have esports, and we're also seeing rapidly changing consumer choices and a very much more digital world. You know, and in addition to that, we have to bounce back from COVID. So it is great timing for us to develop a strategy. We have at the moment got to a very, very initial draft, which is just gone to the board members and they need to shape it. So I won't be able to go into any great detail today, but I'll give you some idea of the general direction of travel in terms of probably the key things we need to cover. But we do need to engage with our stakeholders as a member organisation. We need to move the strategy along very quickly, but balance that with stakeholder engagement of our regional and national member federations. But we do need to establish a very clear purpose, mission, values and priorities, and they need to complement and sit alongside PSAs as we move along together. It needs to provide clear added value to members, to member federations, and indeed to Spin members. And we need to do a lot more collaboration, coordination and partnership. And as Alex mentioned yesterday, to quote him, we need to modernise and rebrand the sport, and PSA and WSF, regions and member federations need to do that together, because together we will be much stronger. So alongside the strategy, next slide, please. Thank you. We also need to make sure we get the basics right. And so whilst we need to be visionary and bold with our strategy, we need to make sure we've got the right governance in place, because we've seen what happens to those sports that don't get their governance right. We need to support our volunteer workforce. We need to strengthen our finances to make us more resilient and more able to respond to opportunities. We need to roll out and make sure we're solid with the new anti-doping education requirements. And every now and again I pop up and want to drive a campaign to make sure we get the right ball, because without promoting the right ball, I don't think that we are going to make our sport as accessible as it needs to be, and try to promote the fact that there are four balls, not just a double yellow. And we need to minimise the barriers to participation. And there was quite a lot of talk yesterday about from Maya and from Alan about needing to reduce and minimise the barriers. So next slide, please. Thank you. And there will be a very strong theme through our new strategy about being more inclusive, about improving accessibility, diversity, and equality of opportunity. And that's not just gender equality. It's across a whole range of different factors. It applies to the WSF board, the commissions. And if you take, for example, our world and regional referees, and I know there's some referees who are listening in, we don't have one female world referee. And Oceania is the only region, I believe, to have one regional referee. So we've got a lot of work to do there, particularly with regard to meeting the criteria for multi-sport games and making sure our officials are also of diverse background. Same with coaches, and Maya mentioned yesterday about if we're going to encourage more females to play, then we probably need more female coaches too. Para squash, our para squash commission had gone a little bit dormant, but it has recently sprung back into life and is now very, very active in terms of pushing along our para squash activities. Squash 57 will be, and I think Patrick's listening in, he's probably our most active commission chair in terms of pushing Squash 57 and the benefits it brings to bringing in a more diverse playing population where all three generations can play together. We talked about courts and about making our sport more visible. Squash isn't the only sport to have issues about visibility. And I've recently been involved in some talks about swimming, having the same problem about putting swimming behind brick walls. So we do need to think about how we make the sport more visible. And we've talked about pop-up squash and outdoor courts and reducing build costs. But we do need, I think, to, as Alan had mentioned, re-inject the focus on fun and fitness, friends and family, if we're to become more accessible and grow the sport. So linked to that, our next slide, please. Thank you. We need to focus on youth, and I think our Olympic campaign probably emphasised that. But the one thing I'm always really impressed with is the extent to which we have so many international junior competition programs around the world, and they are from under 19 to under 11. And there are many sports who would be very envious of our structure, particularly the range of age groups it goes down to. But I think we need to leverage that a lot better and change the perception of our sport. And I think that means we need to change our communication and certainly our engagement with young people. I hope that the new strategy will have a much stronger education presence through it. I think that's important to engage more with education, more focus on fun, and I think there's an importance here about bridging that gap between juniors and the professional game. And we've talked for quite a while about under 21s and under 23s, and I hope that we'll be able to make an under 21 championship a reality in the near future once we manage to get back on track. So one of the things we talked about was about how we were coping with COVID, and coming back to our championships. It's probably our championships that's been most affected by COVID, and the last time we ran a championship, a WSF championship, was in December 2019, and we did roll forward. WSF did try very hard to roll forward the 2020 championships into 2021, but it soon became evident that the 2020 championships were running into the back of or the front of 2021. So we are now focusing on ensuring that we can get as many of our 2021 championships operating. And And there are probably at least three factors there we need to take into consideration. One is closed boundaries, and each nation around the world, the nations are dealing with COVID in a very different way. Some have closed their boundaries and they have very little COVID, and they've closed their boundaries to make sure they don't. And in Europe, there's a much greater emphasis there on reliance on the vaccine. But at the same time, we've still got some airlines that aren't operating either. And when you can get a flight, it's really costly. So we have a lot of things to take into account in terms of ensuring that if we are running a championship, that it has a critical mass of nations and players there. And we're trying to be as agile as possible. And there are a lot of nations that we should thank for their support, their resilience, and their flexibility in working with us on ensuring that we can get as many of our championships played this year. It's much easier with the World Team Championships because they can play. They're mainly professionals and they can play under the PSA protocol. Which is now very well accepted. So yeah, we're hopeful when we're still working very hard. In the meantime, our commissions are probably working. They're probably as active as they've ever been in terms of just working remotely, and certainly the board and the executive board. We've got meetings this weekend are working remotely now, and I think that will be a thing going forward. I think we will have a more effective way of meeting and communicating via a combination of meeting in person and remotely. I think that will become very important. So talking and moving from championships to my next slide is about major games. So my next slide, please, Susan. So the major games are, I can't emphasize how important they are to us in terms of being a really critical showcase, not just to our core audience and established squash players, but our exposure to new audiences. At the moment, that squash is a core sport in the Commonwealth Games, the Pan American Games and the Asian Games, but also in World Games and World Masters Games. And that is really crucial when you consider that the Commonwealth audience is 1/3 of the global population. That audience those audiences are really key, and we don't get another opportunity to expose our sport to such a huge audience. And we need to enhance our presentation. We need to think very carefully, I think, about the sport presentation for those events and the fan experience, that we're not delivering to an established squash audience, but potentially new squash audience out there. We also need to target the games that we're not in, and that includes the other two regions, the European and the African Games. It would be great if we could get into the World University Games and also the International School Games. So you can start to see the education theme through this as well. So there's some work we still need to do. We need to make sure that we really secure our position in existing games, and that we push forward for access into the new game, into other games that we're not in, and there's always a talk about Olympics, and that was raised yesterday. I think we've got a fair amount of work to do before we can feel confident of another bid, and we need to consider what we want to do with regard to 2028 in Los Angeles and 2032, wherever that may be. But it may be in Australia, it may be in Germany. But we probably need to do a very thorough feasibility review across our stakeholders, and working closely with PSA if we are to forward a new bid. So moving on to, I think, my penultimate slide, please. So sharing, and I'm a believer that sharing is. I'm a real advocate of sharing because I think it's a really powerful tool. There's a huge amount of good practice out there. There's a lot of expertise and resources. I think we need, rather than reinventing the wheel, we need to collaborate and we need to coordinate some of that expertise and resource, and rather than reinventing wheels. And if we take, for example, that we had talk about the dominance of Egypt, and Egypt are as concerned as those of us that are chasing Egypt. But what are they doing that we can learn from? And what are other leading nations doing in other areas, whether it be coaching or technology, that we can learn from? And I do think more squash summits. So well done to Sport Aegis, but I think if we can follow this one up and keep the ball rolling on it, that sharing of good practice, I think, will be really important going forward. So final slide, really, and back to this new mindset. I think there's a huge desire to help out there. And since being elected to as president of WSF, I've been amazed by the desire to help and how much expertise and how much is happening out there of people who want to contribute. There are lots of challenges ahead, but also there are lots of opportunities, but we need to carve out those opportunities and take a new approach. And we've got a real opportunity with new PSA strategy and a new WSF strategy, how they complement each other, and how we then respond to COVID and we bring a new impetus. So I'll leave you. So we have this opportunity to start a new journey. It's a new adventure with a new roadmap and a new approach. And so just finally, I'll just finish with that an often quoted African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zena. We really appreciate your time. So we have actually a bunch of really interesting questions here. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them for you. So the first question is by Kirill, who works at RankedIn as a business developer. So his question is, while we see big influences like Francesco Totti and Ibrahimovic promoting paddle, squash has barely any presence online. What can WSF do to help increase the visibility on social media? Maybe a social media management course for the federations?
I think we need to do a huge amount in the whole of social media, digital, being more data driven. We do need a lot of help there, and I think it is an area where we would admittedly say that we have lagged behind. I think WSF has lagged behind, and it is something that needs to have very much a prominence in the new strategy. We are being helped by we've got some joint social media activity with PSA, and that's helping. But we need to do a lot more. I don't have all the answers today. What I do know, and I would share with the person who raised the question, I would share with them that it's going to be really critical going forward.
Thank you. Our next question is by Alicia, who is the former director of U.S. Olympic Committee. And she is asking you, what do you think can turn the tide to be seriously considered to be included into the Olympics?
Sorry, what was the first part of the question again?
Sorry, so it's, what do you think can turn the tide to be seriously considered to be included into the Olympics?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it would be helpful if we could be really clear with the IOC with regard to what they're looking for, and be realistic about a bid going forward. But come back to my question on getting the basics right. I think there are a lot of things that we need to make sure that we confidently got in place before we go for a bid. And I think we need to scrutinise that. I've mentioned one or two of those things, such as making sure that we've got a very solid refereeing structure, for example. There are a lot, but the presence in terms of us being a youth sport and growing the youth participation, but also showcasing what we are doing far more effectively. I do think it comes back down to what Alex was saying yesterday. about needing to rebrand the sport, reposition, rebrand it. And we're doing some great stuff, but I don't think we're getting the messages out there. So very much about giving a perception, because I think perceptions are as important as reality. And I think we have some perceptions to change, and modernising and rebranding the sport, and doing that, WSF working closely with PSA and with our regions and nations is going to be really important going forward. So it'd be quite interesting to know what our members of NOCs feel as well. I think we need to get the feedback, and the very honest feedback, from a range of angles before we start to pull together a feasibility study for next Olympics. But we, US squash is one of our really strong federations. And if the rumours are true that the next one may be in Australia, then we missed the opportunity of getting squash into Sydney, but it could be really a very real opportunity of working with our Australian and Oceania colleagues for 2032.
Thank you so much. Another question by Jonathan Smith. He's saying, in the UK over the last 10 years, we have seen multiple squash clubs shutting. Is there a concern that the long-term future for squash growth is under threat if access becomes increasingly limited?
Yeah, I mean, it is a worry, and I think COVID hasn't helped, and we really won't know what the response is to COVID until we start to unlock. But certainly in Australia, I think although there isn't any international competition happening, it seems that people have come back with renewed enthusiasm. I think perhaps we might appreciate some of the essentials more when we do come back. But yeah, it is worrying. We've got our mature markets, and I think it's our mature markets of the established squash nations that are having to work harder to keep the sport buoyant. So I think we have a lot of work to do. I think WSF can set some of the parameters. It can't necessarily control what's happening locally, but I think the profile, if we can raise the profile of the sport a lot more, and it comes back to the questions of social media and where we are, and appearing as positively in social media. There's a lot of things I think we need to put in place, but the profile of the sport and people's perception of the sport is going to be really important going forward, and growing the youth aspect of it. So I hope that some of the things that we've put in, we will have in our strategy, will help regional federations and national federations. And I think learning from best practice about what is working where, and sharing some of that, and having some platforms, more platforms and town hall sessions and summits where we can share some of that good practice where things are working well, is going to be really important going forward. So I think there's a lot of work to do, particularly in our mature markets, but there are some great signs of big growth in some of our newer markets.
Thank you so much, Zena. I think we have time for one more. So another one from Alex Betts. He's asking, what other world sport federations do you think is a great example to follow?
Really good question. I think some of the young sports like triathlon is an interesting one, how that has grown. And I think small and new federations and sports can be quite agile in the way they set themselves up. I think we have an advantage in squash of being relatively small and a close-knit community to have that agility. But you look at sports like Techball, which has grown hugely, but it's got a huge amount of finance behind its promotion. I still would say that I believe that squash fits the modern day lifestyle as well, or if not better than it did in the massive boom of the 70s. It's short, it gives all-round fitness, it's social, you can get fit in a short period of time, it gives you a social network, it has a lot going for it, but I do think coming back down to the rebranding and getting it out there, I think that's where we have the work to do, to put squash on a new marketing platform. So I think when we can see where the new nations where it is growing fast.
Thank you so much, Zena, for your time and for answering all these questions. There's actually a lot more questions from people. So I just wanted to ask you, are you going to be available in the break rooms for people to chat with you?
Yeah, I can be in the break room for a short period of time, but we've got an executive committee meeting this morning as well. So this is a rather unfortunate coincidence, but yeah, I will be. But by all means, please do email any questions that you have, and we'll answer them. And any feedback, any proposals, any offers of help, please do drop us a line at the World Squash Federation.
Thank you so much. So for all the attendees, Zena will be in the lounge. If you have any more questions and you want to have a quick chat, please don't hesitate to do that. Thank you so much, Zena, for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have a session by Coop. As I mentioned earlier, Coop created the world's first cinnamon t-shirt using recyclable plastic bottles to achieve a natural antimicrobial function with the use of cinnamon extract. The session is basically going to be run by Brian Chuang, who is the co-founder of Coop. But before he comes on, Coop will play a short video, and then we will have Brian come and. Thank you so much for the video, and I believe we already have Brian on.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Kenzie.
Hi, thank you so much for your time with us today.
No, thank you for having me.
And I believe you will be also announcing the second winner of the t-shirt, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. Right, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think people are so excited about that.
Okay, thanks, yeah. Hopefully,
okay,
yeah, thanks so much.
The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, Kenzie. Hi everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, good morning in the States. It's my pleasure and honor to be here to be part of the Squash Summit. So first of all, I'd like to thank Kenzie for being the speaker today, and also Zena just now for speaking about the squash in general. And also like to thank the Sportagious team with Furkan and Zushan for inviting me, and also everyone's involved. So a little bit about Coop is that we are a sustainable performance wear brand that I co-founded with my partner Crystal back in 2019. And the whole story started off being, so my background, I've been working in the textile industry for over 10 years. And over the last 10 years, I've been thinking about throughout the time how we can actually make the whole industry of performance wear more sustainable. Because from my experience, that everything from the sort of the quick dry, sweat wicking, antimicrobial functions that's been added in all the performance wear, essentially you're kind of bathing in chemicals where these are sort of very short lasting and have very big impact on the environment. So it kind of we started thinking about ideas and also doing our R&Ds. So we came across this technology from Taiwan, which uses cinnamon as a natural antimicrobial additive. So in a way that cinnamon has actually long been used since the Egyptian times. It's probably one of the oldest spices that's been known actually. So it's actually commonly used in the food industry as a preservative, but it's the first time that anyone has actually been using it for clothing and fiber. So, which is kind of really exciting because personally, I'm a big sort of sports and active person, and a lot of the performance clothing I wear, it ends up smelling pretty bad. And I guess I don't know how many people. I mean, some of you may actually have kind of resonant with that. So that kind of the stinky odor from after sports because of the sweating and everything. So it was very exciting for me to come across this technology. So this is when my partner said, let's do something about it, and combine it with recycled plastic, which is obviously a big problem in the world right now with single-use plastics. We want to use recycled plastic and combining with this cinnamon technology to make it more, to reduce the single-use plastic and also make everything a little bit more eco-friendly and sustainable. So what we believe that in terms of how it can actually help in the squash community is that obviously in squash, what we've created with the cinnamon t-shirt is that it's super lightweight. It weighs less than 100 grams for a large size for men's. So I think this will actually help a lot because obviously during squash, you need anything to offload any kind of weight, so you can move freely and and be very agile. So and also the ultimate, the sort of quick dry and sweat wicking property can help a lot. Obviously, it's a very intensive sport. I think players will definitely benefit from a lot from being able to sort of wick away the sweat, so you don't become very sticky, and also it makes you kind of feel more fresh and comfortable as well, so you can actually enjoy the game. And I guess on some end with the cinnamon technology of being antimicrobial, which kind of fends off the odor, it's kind of in some ways kind of like an etiquette. So obviously a lot of times you're playing inside quite a compact space, so it would be quite nice for people around you to smell a bit nicer. And also obviously going after this a session, if you're going for a pint or a drink, you can actually just wear it and without actually smelling too bad. So I mean, I personally have actually been testing this shirt for over 2 years, and the longest I've gone without washing a t-shirt from gym sessions and also like active sport is probably 10 days. So it seems to work very well for me, and I think Zushan and Furkan, they've also testified for the t-shirt. So I think they had, they are pretty agree with the sort of functionality of the t-shirts. We've also been testing with other sports in industry. So we were also part of the accelerator, hyper accelerator in last year. So we actually had a chance to test in Taiwan over here in high humidity, which is like 35 degrees in the summer, with baseball teams and then other athletes, and they all really like the t-shirt. So I really hope we have the chance to actually promote this for the squash community here. So for this special event, we're also offering a special discount of 20% on our website, www.coop.co, and I'll paste it's the code. It will be Squash Summits, and I'll put that in the chat session, or come over to our booth later and we can chat a bit more. So lastly, I wanted to talk to announce the winner for the second cinnamon t-shirt draw. So the winner is sorry if I excuse my pronunciation. So the winner is Daniel Diding from the general manager of Court Tech. So congratulations, and hope you like our t-shirts, and do let us know with any feedbacks. And lastly, we also have a t-shirt that's on offer. So what we'll be doing is we would like anyone to come over to our website and sign up to our newsletter, or even just sign up like us on our Instagram, and we will get in touch after the end of the Squash Summit directly with the third t-shirt. So thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you all during the networking sessions. Thanks a lot for all the organizers and everyone involved. I think definitely the squash community need a bit more, or even more of these summits to bring more awareness and diversity into the sports. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. We have one question from Patrick.
Yeah.
So Patrick Osborne, he's asking, so he's saying, Brian, your garments have some serious USPs. What, if any, are the disadvantages of your t-shirts?
Disadvantages?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, thanks a lot for the question. For disadvantages, first of all, I think in terms of the antimicrobial function and the odor, because what we are using is something that's natural. So comparing to the chemicals that's being used in the industry is a slightly weaker form. So we actually, I forgot to mention, we actually started off on Kickstarter last year, and we've delivered over 1,500 t-shirts and over 500 backers. And so far, the feedbacks, I would say 80% of people are happy and also like really feel that the anti-odor function works. But there are still sort of there's 20% of people will come back to us and think that, you know, it's not sort of up to the expectations. So I guess in some ways that odor is also quite a subjective thing. So there may be something that, you know, it maybe wouldn't work for everyone, but at least I think for the majority, you know, 80% of the people would feel it definitely has that, you know, they can feel the difference. And secondly, at the end of the day, our t-shirt is still made of plastic, which is although it's recycled plastic, we're trying to do a bit more to the whole environmental issue. It's still recycled plastic. So there are recent, you know, questions about microfiber in the sort of the whole man-made fiber, these kind of synthetic fiber industry, but that goes across to everything else in the market. But what I would say is that by reducing the number of washes, like the way we build our technology in, a lot of these kind of microfiber releases actually come from washing and drying. So by obviously, you know, it's down to consumer behavior, that how much you wash your clothes. But the idea, hopefully, that with this technology, people would, you know, don't need to wash as much as possible, and also at the end, it actually saves a lot of textile waste, which is another problem that I've not really talked about too much earlier. So we also have a take back program. So we recycle our t-shirts. We actually built it to be recyclable, and we're also working with recyclers over here in Taiwan to sort of, you know, recycle all the fibers into new garments, basically.
Thank you so much, Brian, for this answer. We actually have a couple of people in the Q&A section, like Jonathan, who said, "I'm impressed by the candor of that answer." So thank you so much for answering in such a detailed manner, and we really, really appreciate your time. And I wanted to ask you, so can people order the t-shirt online?
Yeah, so we actually have our own website. So we are actually a D2C business. So we've been pretty much shipping directly from our website orders since last September. The only complications, obviously, with COVID. So let's say for the UK, they've recently just opened up for the shipping. So there's also slight delays, but, you know, obviously we try to communicate as much as possible with our consumers. But yeah, you can order directly from our website as well. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get one myself.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much for your time.
Well, hopefully you also win the third one as well, maybe.
Yes. Okay, so one more thing before we go into our break. So the Squash Players app, I'm basically just want to talk a bit more about that. So the Squash Players app is in the process of crowdsourcing every single squash venue globally, and they're planting one tree per venue. So for all the new squash venues added via the Squash Players app up until the end of the Squash Summit, the Squash Players app will be planting 2 trees per squash venue. Now we're gonna go ahead and go on a break on a short break. And before we go, I just want to give a huge shout out to our diamond sponsors, Ranked In and SportCam. See you all very soon.